Coraline 2, The Other Door, by David Eden. Chapter 1, The New Tenant. 3 years was long enough to grow scar tissue over memories, but not long enough to forget the taste of fear. Coraline Jones stood at her bedroom window, watching the moving van struggle up the Pink Palace's cracked driveway like some dying beetle. Rain hammered the glass, Oregon rain, the kind that didn't so much fall as seep into everything, rotting it from the inside out. She was 14 now, taller, her blue hair grown out to its natural brown, but her eyes still held that particular sharpness that comes from seeing too much too young. The new family had a kid. Of course they did. "Coraline, come help with dinner," her mother called from downstairs, voice muffled by distance and the neck brace she still wore on bad days. The accident had healed wrong, leaving Mel Jones with a permanent tilt to her head, as if she was always listening for something. Maybe she was. Maybe they all were. The kid was maybe 7, 8 tops. Boy or girl, Coraline couldn't tell through the rain and distance. They stood beside the van in a yellow raincoat, Jesus Christ, a yellow raincoat, holding something small against their chest, the way kids held precious things, the way she'd once held a doll with button eyes. Her scar itched. 3 years old, a puckered line across her palm where she'd grabbed the other mother's needle fingers, and they'd gone right through. The doctors had been puzzled. The wound was too clean, too precise, like someone had driven a heated wire through her hand. She'd told them she'd fallen on a garden tool. Easier than the truth. Downstairs, her father was making his special mac and cheese, which meant he'd found some new cheese at the farmer's market that probably cost more than their weekly grocery budget. Charlie Jones had discovered artisanal cooking the way some people discovered religion, with fervor and a complete inability to shut up about it. "Fromage dauphinois," he announced, holding up something that looked like it had already gone through a digestive system. "The guy at the market said it would change my life." "Your life needs changing?" Mel asked, not looking up from her laptop. 3 years and 17 catalogs later, she still typed like she was punishing the keyboard for existing. Coraline grabbed plates from the cabinet, noting how her hands didn't shake anymore. Time was funny that way. You could train yourself not to flinch at button displays in craft stores. You could learn to walk past the hall mirror without checking for movement behind the glass. You could almost convince yourself it had been a very specific nightmare. Almost. "New families moving into the basement apartment," Charlie said, stirring cheese that smelled like feet wrapped in gym socks. "Young couple. Kid about 8, I think. Mother's some kind of artist." The plate slipped, caught itself on the counter's edge. Coraline steadied it with hands that wanted to tremble. "What kind of artist?" The question came out steady. 3 years of practice. "Textile artist, I think Bobinski said. Makes dolls." The scar began to burn. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky like something huge turning over in its sleep. The lights flickered. They always did in storms. The Pink Palace's wiring was older than God and twice as temperamental. And in that moment of darkness, Coraline could have sworn she heard it. Tap, 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 like needle fingers on glass, like something patient finally losing patience. When the lights came back, her parents were looking at her. "You okay, Button?" her father asked, using the nickname that had become a test between them. She'd flinched at it for months after. Now she just smiled. Fine, just thunder. But through the kitchen window, she could see the new family's kid looking up at the house, looking, specifically, at the window where she knew, a small door waited behind new wallpaper. The kid waved, and the thing they held against their chest waved too, with arms too long and button eyes that caught the lightning like coins on dead water. Chapter 2. The artist's sleep was a liar that promised rest and delivered memories with teeth. Coraline woke at 3:17 a.m., always 3:17, like her body had set an alarm for the exact moment she'd first crawled through that tunnel 3 years ago. Her sheets were soaked with sweat that smelled like fear and something else, something sweet and rotten, like fruit left too long in the sun. The tapping wasn't in her head this time. She lay still, breathing through her nose, counting. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3, tap, tap, tap. At the window, soft, almost polite, the way someone might knock if they didn't really want to wake you but had something important to say. The curtains were thick. She'd insisted on that after everything, No more gauzy things that let shadows play, but moonlight leaked around the edges. Enough to see by. Enough to know she wasn't alone. Don't look, the rational part of her brain advised. Whatever's out there feeds on attention. But she was already moving, bare feet finding the cold floor with practiced silence. The house had taught her its creaks and groans, which boards would betray her and which would keep secrets. She avoided the third plank from the wall, stepped over the spot where old water damage made the floor soft as flesh. At the window, she hesitated. Through the fabric, a shadow, small, child-sized. The new kid, she thought, and almost relaxed. Almost. She pulled the curtain back an inch. The button-eyed doll sat on the windowsill, one soft arm raised as if waving, or beckoning. Its yellow raincoat gleamed with moisture, and its blue yarn hair, exactly the shade hers had been, dripped steadily onto the sill. But dolls couldn't climb 3 stories. Dolls couldn't. It turned its head, a full 180 degrees, like an owl, like something broken. Coraline stumbled back, curtain falling closed, heart hammering telegrams to every nerve. Run, hide, get Mom and Dad. Instead, she grabbed the baseball bat from beside her bed, another post-Beldam addition to her decor, and yanked the curtain wide. Nothing. Just rain and the ordinary darkness of an Oregon night. But on the sill, wet spots in the shape of small handprints. Her name's Miranda Thorne, YB said the next morning, rain still pissing down like the sky had a bladder infection. They sat in the Joneses' kitchen, sharing coffee that Coraline had started drinking black because it tasted like being awake, and she needed that now. Graham says she's from somewhere back east, Portland, maybe. YB had shot up like a weed in 3 years, all knees and elbows and an Adam's apple that bobbed when he was nervous, which was always around her. They'd tried dating for about 5 minutes last year before realizing that shared trauma was a shit foundation for romance. Better to be friends who understood why you sometimes had to check that your reflection had the right number of fingers. And the kid? Jamie, quiet, kinda. He made a vague gesture that meant weird without saying it. We live in the Pink Palace, Coraline reminded him. Weird's kind of the default setting. But she was already planning. After school, she'd introduce herself, scope out the situation, make sure the new family understood the house rules, spoken and otherwise. Don't trust 2 perfect things. Don't go through small doors. Don't follow the mice. Definitely don't follow the mice. You seen Mr. B lately? YB asked, like he'd been reading her mind. She had, actually. Yesterday, just before the moving van arrived. He'd been on the roof in the rain, arms spread wide, head tilted back like he was drinking the sky. The water had run off his blue skin in rivulets that looked too thick, too dark, like whatever kept him that color was washing away. He's fine, she lied. YB nodded, accepting it because what else could you do? Tell someone their upstairs neighbor might be dissolving? That you'd started noticing he only ate cheese now, nothing but cheese, wheels and wheels of it, delivered weekly from some place that didn't have a return address. After YB left for school, he went to the public high school while she'd convinced her parents to let her do online classes, easier to keep an eye on things that way. Coraline made her rounds. Check the little door, still wallpapered over, still solid. Check the mirror, only her reflection, correct number of everything. Check the garden, tulips still red, no faces in the flowers. Everything normal, everything fine. So why did her scar burn like someone was sewing it shut from the inside? At 4 p.m., she knocked on the basement apartment door. The kid Jamie answered. Up close, indeterminate as fog. Could be a boyish girl or a girlish boy, with hair the color of wheat and eyes like old pennies. Hi, Coraline said. I'm from upstairs. Wanted to welcome you to the Pink Palace. Jamie stared. Not unfriendly, just evaluating, like a cat deciding if you were worth its time. Mom's working. Jamie finally said. She doesn't like being interrupted when she's working. What's she working on? A smile then, small and secret. She's making friends for me. We left all mine behind when we moved. From somewhere in the apartment came a sound Coraline knew in her bones, the whisper of thread through fabric, the soft scratch of needle through cloth. Can I see? She heard herself asking. Jamie's smile widened. She says you can. She says she's been wanting to meet you for such a long time. Such a long time. The words echoed wrong, like they'd bounced off surfaces that shouldn't exist. Coraline's scar went from burning to screaming, and she knew, knew she should run. Get her parents. Get Wybie. Get anyone. Instead, she followed Jamie into the apartment that smelled of sawdust and thread and something sweet rotting in hidden spaces. Because that was the thing about patterns. Once you'd survived them, you thought you knew their shape. You thought you could dance the same steps and win the same prizes. You forgot that patterns could learn too, and sometimes they could wear new faces. Chapter 3. The Collection. The basement apartment was wrong in ways that made Coraline's teeth ache. It should have been identical to theirs, same floor plan, same bones, but Miranda Thorne had transformed it into something that belonged in a medical textbook about nightmares. Every surface sprouted fabric, bolts of it hung from the ceiling like flayed skin. Mannequin parts clustered in corners, their plastic flesh the color of old teeth. And everywhere, the dolls. They lined shelves that hadn't been there before. Filled vintage prams parked 3 deep against the walls, spilled from open trunks like soft bodies from mass graves. Some were beautiful in the way poisonous things often are. Others looked like they'd been turned inside out and sewn back wrong. But it was the smell that really got her. Sawdust, yes, thread and fabric softener, and the musty tang of old cotton. But underneath, something else. Something that reminded her of the space behind the mirror where ghost children had waited for decades, digesting in the dark. "Mom's in her workroom," Jamie said, leading her deeper into the apartment. The kid moved like smoke, there and not there, substantial and then suddenly not. "She's really excited to meet you. She's been working on something special." "Turn around," Coraline's brain screamed. "Turn around right fucking now." But her feet kept moving, because that was the thing about surviving horror. It made you cocky, made you think you'd leveled up, gained immunity, like horror was chickenpox instead of cancer. The workroom door was painted black. Not painted over, but painted black from the start, like someone had planned for it to be a mouth in the wall. Jamie knocked. 3 times, of course it was 3 times, and a voice from inside said, "Come." Just that. Come. Not come in or enter, or any of the normal things people said. Just that single word that could mean so many things. Miranda Thorne sat at an industrial sewing machine that looked like it could stitch steel. She was maybe 35, pretty in a sharp way, with prematurely gray hair pulled back so tight it stretched her features into something almost but not quite human. Her fingers never stopped moving, feeding fabric through the machine with mechanical precision. "Coraline Jones," she said without looking up. "I've heard so much about you." "From who?" Coraline kept her voice level, but her hand found her pocket where she'd started carrying a box cutter, just in case. "Oh, you know how it is in small towns. Everyone talks. Feed, stitch, pull, feed, stitch, pull. Especially about local legends." The doll taking shape under her hands was perfect. Too perfect. Coraline recognized the subject immediately. Miss Spink, complete with miniature knitting needles and a concerned expression. The kind of detail that required study, observation, time spent watching. "That's impressive," Coraline managed, "isn't it?" Miranda finally looked up, and her eyes were the color of old pennies. Just like Jamie's. Exactly like Jamie's. "I find that capturing the essence of a person requires really seeing them, understanding what they want, what they fear, what they'd trade anything to have or to avoid." She held up the doll, and Miss Spink's button eyes caught the light like drops of oil. For instance, poor Miss Spink, terrified of losing another dog. She'd do anything to keep Hamish healthy, even trust a stranger who promised to help. A chill walked up Coraline's spine on spider legs. "What did you do?" "Me? Nothing. Yet." Miranda set the doll aside, picked up another piece of fabric. This one was yellow-green, the color of healing bruises, the color of Mr. Babinski's skin when the light hit wrong. "But it's interesting, isn't it? How people make bargains without realizing. How they open doors they can't close. Like the little door," Coraline said. Miranda's hands never paused. What little door? But she was smiling. A small, secret smile that said, "We both know what we're talking about, so why pretend?" "Jamie," Miranda said, "show Coraline your new friends." The kid, and Coraline was starting to think kid might be the wrong word, led her to a corner where a child-sized table held a tea party in progress. 3 dolls sat in tiny chairs, their button eyes reflecting nothing. One wore a yellow raincoat, one had blue yarn hair, one was still being sewn, but Coraline could already see the resemblance. The gangly limbs, the nervous hunch of the shoulders. Wybie. She was making Wybie. Aren't they wonderful? Jamie asked. Mom says they're practice for the real thing. Coraline's scar split open. She felt it tear, felt hot blood run down her palm, and when she looked, the skin was whole, unbroken. The pain was coming from somewhere else, somewhere deeper. I have to go, she said. So soon? Miranda didn't look up from her sewing. But we have so much to talk about the house, about what lives in its walls, about why you're the only child to ever come back. The only child to ever come back. The words hit like a physical blow. Because of course she was. The ghost children had been freed, but they'd still been caught, still been consumed. She was the anomaly, the glitch in the pattern, the one who got away. Stay for tea, Jamie suggested, picking up the Coraline doll. Its button eyes were black as wells, deep as the space between stars. Mom made cookies. They taste like home. But Coraline was already backing toward the door, box cutter out now, hand shaking. Miranda's sewing machine never stopped its rhythm. Feed, stitch, pull. Feed, stitch, pull. You'll be back, Miranda called after her. They always come back. Once they've been through the door, they can't help it. It's like an itch you can't scratch, like a song you can't stop humming. Coraline ran. Up the stairs, through her apartment, past her startled parents, into her room, where she slammed the door and shoved her dresser against it. The button-eyed doll from last night sat on her pillow. It was holding something. A note, written in handwriting that looked like spiders had dipped their legs in ink. She's not the only one who remembers how you taste. Coraline grabbed the doll, ready to throw it out the window, burn it, destroy it like she had the last one. But when she touched it, she felt them. All of them. Every child who'd ever been lost to this house, dissolved in its belly, forgotten by the world. And somewhere among those voices, getting stronger, getting closer, she heard the one that had haunted her for 3 years. Mother's home. Chapter 4. The unraveling Wybie's grandmother died at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday morning she was walking around again. Not zombie walking. Not shambling corpse from a B-movie walking. She moved like herself, talked like herself, even complained about her arthritis like herself. The only difference was her eyes, flat black buttons sewn on with thread the color of old blood. Graham? Wybie stood in Coraline's kitchen, shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. He'd biked over in his pajamas, hadn't even grabbed shoes. His socks left wet footprints on the linoleum. She died. I was there. The heart monitor went flat. The nurses called it. And then... Coraline's mother prompted gently, but her hand gripped her coffee mug so tight the ceramic creaked. And then she sat up and asked for her knitting. The kitchen fell silent, except for the rain, which hadn't stopped in 3 days. It drummed against the windows like fingers, like something wanting in, or maybe wanting them to come out. Where is she now? Charlie asked. Home, making cookies. She offered to drive me to school. Wybie laughed, high and broken. My dead grandma offered to drive me to school. Coraline touched her scar. The phantom pain had become real 2 days ago, the wound opening and closing on its own schedule, bleeding through bandages that couldn't contain what wasn't really there. Her parents had wanted to take her to the hospital, but what would she say? My stigmata is acting up because the monster who gave it to me is coming back? We need to check on the others, she said. They split up, because that's what you did in horror movies when you wanted everyone to die faster. But this wasn't a movie, and they weren't characters. They were just people who'd stumbled into a story with its own rules, and rule number 1 was that the house always won. Coraline took the actresses. She found them in their apartment, which now smelled like wet dog and something else. Something sweet and cloying, like flowers left too long in a funeral home. Coraline, dear, Miss Spink called out, not turning from where she sat with her back to the door. Come see what we've done with Angus. Angus had been dead for a week. They'd cried, they'd grieved, they'd talked about having him stuffed to join their collection. But now he sat between them on the sofa, tail wagging, tongue lolling. His button eyes tracked Coraline's movement across the room. Isn't it wonderful? Miss Forcible clapped her hands. Miranda showed us how. Such a clever girl. She said death was just another kind of sleep, and everyone deserves to wake up. The dog barked. It sounded like fabric tearing. Upstairs, she found Mr. Babinski in his apartment, which had become something between a nest and a warren. Cheese wheels stacked to the ceiling, holes gnawed in the walls revealing passages that shouldn't exist, and everywhere mice. But not the white mice from before. These were pale as bone, with button eyes that gleamed like oil drops. "The mice," he said without turning around. "They say the circus is coming to town." His skin had gone past blue into something that didn't have a name. When he moved, parts of him stayed behind for a second, like he was coming apart at the seams. Literally at the seams. She could see the stitching now, holding him together. "Mr. B," she started, but he held up a hand. His fingers were fused together, wrapped in thread. Not Mr. B anymore. Mr. B was story. Now just Babinski. Just character waiting for curtain call. The mice swarmed around his feet, spelling out words. Soon. Mother. Home. Back in her apartment, they compared notes. Everyone in the Pink Palace except the Joneses had been touched, changed, improved, Miranda Thorne would probably say, made into better versions of themselves, versions that didn't fear death or loss or loneliness. "We have to leave," Charlie said, already reaching for his phone. "Pack what we can. Get in the car." "And go where?" Mel's voice was flat. "You think this stops at the property line? You think there's some magic distance where we'll be safe?" She was right. Coraline knew it in her bones. The other mother didn't respect boundaries. She'd reached through a locked door, through a sealed well, through death itself. Geography was just another rule she'd learned to break. "Then we fight," YB said, but his voice cracked on the word. Hard to fight when your grandma's downstairs making chocolate chip cookies with button eyes. "With what?" Coraline asked. "The key's at the bottom of the well. The door's sealed. We don't even know how she's doing this." But even as she said it, she understood. The dolls, Miranda's perfect watching dolls, they weren't just representations. They were anchors, points of connection between this world and the other. Every stitch was a binding, every button eye a window. "We burn them," she said. "Every last doll in that apartment." "You think she'll just let us?" Mel asked. "No, but what else do we have?" They made their plans as the rain hammered down and the house groaned around them. Salt circles, probably useless but comforting. Iron nails, Miss Forcible had mentioned something about them once. The garden shears Coraline had carried 3 years ago, still sharp, still waiting. But when they opened the apartment door, ready for war, Jamie stood in the hallway. "Mom wants to know if you'd like to come for dinner," the child said, smiling with too many teeth. "She's made your favorite." Behind Jamie, the hallway stretched longer than it should, lined with doors that hadn't been there before. Each one small, each one familiar, each one opening onto darkness that had the quality of hunger. "Tell your mom," Coraline said, gripping the shears so tight her reopened scar screamed, "that we need to wash up first." Jamie's smile widened. "She says you have 20 minutes. Don't be late. Mother hates when dinner gets cold." The child skipped away, and where their feet touched the floor, tiny flowers bloomed. Snapdragons, opening and closing their mouths like they were trying to scream. 20 minutes to save everyone. 20 minutes to fight something that had already won. 20 minutes before dinner was served, and they discovered what was really on the menu. Coraline looked at her parents, at YB, at the people who'd chosen to stand with her, even though running would have been smarter. "Okay," she said, and her voice only shook a little. "Let's go kill my other mother. Again." Because that was the thing about patterns. Sometimes the only way to break them was to stop playing by their rules entirely. And if there was one thing Coraline Jones had learned in 3 years of looking over her shoulder, it was this. When you can't run and you can't hide, the only option left is to bite back harder than the thing that's trying to eat you. Chapter 5. The Dinner Party. The basement apartment had given up pretending to be normal. Where walls should have been, there was only silk, great sheets of it stretching like skin between wooden bones. The floor squelched underfoot, soft as a tongue, and when Coraline looked down, she could see things moving beneath the surface. The ceiling dripped with something that wasn't quite water, each drop hanging too long before falling, like the space was teaching itself new physics. Miranda Thorne stood at a stove that had too many burners, stirring pots that bubbled with colors that shouldn't exist. She'd changed out of her human costume into something that made more sense, a dress sewn from hundreds of doll faces, each one blinking and whispering in its own tiny voice. "Right on time," she said without turning. "I do so appreciate punctuality." The dining table was set for 7. 3 years ago, it would have been set for 3. But the other mother had learned, evolved, understood that isolation was less effective than corruption. Why take one child when you could have a whole family? Why settle for a single soul when you could feast on connections, relationships, love itself? "Sit," Miranda said, and Coraline felt her legs moving before she could stop them. The chair pulled itself out, wrapped around her like an embrace. Beside her, her parents and YB fought the same compulsion and lost. The other dinner guests were already seated. YB's grandmother smiled with her button eyes, passing rolls that steamed with the scent of earth and copper. Miss Spink and Miss Forcible sat side by side, their faces young again, their linked hands showing too many fingers. Mr. Babinski had dissolved into something mostly theoretical, held in his chair by spider silk and good intentions. "Now then," Miranda began serving. The ladle in her hand was carved from what looked like finger bones. "Let's discuss terms." "Terms?" Charlie Jones managed to speak, though the chair had wrapped tendrils around his throat. "For your stay, of course." She placed a plate in front of each of them. The food was perfect, too perfect. Coraline's showed her favorite meal from when she was 6, before her parents got busy, before everything went complicated. You see, the old way was so inefficient. All that hunting, that trickery, so much work for so little reward. She sat at the head of the table, and when she did, her face flickered. For just a moment, Coraline saw what was underneath. The sharp angles, the needle fingers, the mouth that could unhinge like a snake's. The other mother, wearing Miranda Thorne like a costume. "But then I realized," the beldam continued, smoothing her human face back into place, "why should I limit myself? Why have one world when I could have both? Why eat children when I could have everything?" "You can't," Mel said through gritted teeth. The door was a choice. My choice. A limitation I placed on myself out of, let's call it nostalgia." The beldam smiled, and Miranda's face struggled to contain it. "But doors are just ideas, really, and ideas can change." She gestured to the walls, where dozens of small doors had opened like eyes. Through each one, a different view, the real Pink Palace, but wrong. In one, the garden grew backward into the earth. In another, the rain fell up. In a third, Coraline saw herself from 3 years ago, crawling through a tunnel that led to this moment. "Time," the beldam said, "is also just an idea." The food on their plates began to move. Coraline's childhood favorite reformed itself into something with too many legs that tried to crawl into her mouth. She kept her lips pressed tight, but beside her, YB wasn't fast enough. Something gray and quick darted between his teeth. His eyes rolled back, then forward. When they settled, they were flat black buttons. "Much better," he said in a voice like silk being torn. "I was so tired of being scared." "YB," his grandmother clapped her button eyes blinking in sequence. "Now we can be a proper family." The thing wearing YB's face turned to Coraline. "You should join us. It doesn't hurt. Well, it does, but only for a moment, like being born backward." "Fuck you," Coraline snarled, but her voice sounded small in the vastness the room had become. "Such language," the beldam tutted. "Miranda worked so hard on this meal. The least you could do is try it." The chair squeezed tighter. Coraline felt her ribs creak, her vision starting to tunnel. Beside her, her parents fought their own battles, her mother's typing fingers trying to find purchase on something that would let her fight back, her father humming tunelessly, the way he did when he was terrified. "I'll make you a deal," Coraline gasped out. The pressure eased slightly. "Oh, the same game as before, but bigger stakes." The beldam leaned forward, and Miranda's face couldn't quite hide the hunger underneath. "I'm listening. If I win, you let everyone go. Not just my family. Everyone. You go back to whatever hole you crawled out of, and you stay there." "And if you lose?" Coraline met those penny-colored eyes that were really black buttons that were really holes in the universe. "Then you get me, willingly. No tricks, smite, no force. I'll sew the buttons on myself." "Coraline, no," her mother started, but the chair wrapped a tendril around her mouth. The beldam considered. Around the table, the button-eyed people whispered in voices like rustling paper. The walls breathed. The small doors opened and closed like mouths tasting the air. Interesting, the beldam said finally. But not enough. You've already proven you can win my games. Why should I play again? Because you're proud, Coraline said. Because you've spent 3 years thinking about how I beat you. Because you want to prove it was a fluke. Perhaps, or perhaps I just enjoy watching you squirm. The beldam stood, and Miranda's body moved wrong, like a marionette with tangled strings. But very well. One game. My choice this time. What game? The beldam smiled with too many teeth in too many rows. Hide and seek. You hide, I seek. If I can't find you before dawn, you win. That's it. Oh, there are rules. You can't leave the Pink Palace. You can't hide in the same place twice. And, she gestured to the button-eyed dinner guests, they'll be playing too, on my side. 6 hours until dawn, 7 hunters who knew the house better than she did and nowhere to run. Deal, Coraline said. The beldam clapped her hands and the sound was like bones breaking. Wonderful. You have 5 minutes to hide, starting now. The chairs released them all at once. Charlie grabbed for Coraline, but she was already moving, the garden shears in her hand. Find somewhere safe, she told her parents. Barricade yourselves in. We're not leaving you. Yes, you are. She kissed her mother's cheek, hugged her father hard. This is my fight, always has been. She ran, leaving them calling after her, because sentiment would kill her now and she had a game to win. Behind her, she heard the beldam counting in a voice like lullabies sung wrong. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. The house stretched before her, full of shadows and secrets and small doors that led to worse places. Time to hide, time to seek, time to end this, one way or another. Chapter 6. The Hiding Game. The Pink Palace had become a living thing, and it was hunting her. Coraline pressed herself into the crawl space between the walls, feeling the house's pulse through the wood. 4 hours until dawn. She'd already burned through 3 hiding spots. The empty water heater closet. Miss Spink had found her, humming show tunes through button eyes. The trunk in the attic. Mr. Babinski had simply dissolved through the lid like water. And the old dumbwaiter shaft. Wybie had waited at the bottom, patient as a spider. Now she was in the bones of the house itself, crawling through spaces that shouldn't exist. The walls here were older than the rest of the palace, made from wood that felt too warm, too soft. Sometimes she'd put her hand down and feel a heartbeat that wasn't hers. Through the gaps in the boards, she could see them searching. The button-eyed things that had been her neighbors moved in patterns that hurt to watch, jerky, stop-motion movements like badly animated dolls. They checked the same spots over and over, as if their memories were skipping like scratched records. But the beldam was smarter. She moved through the house like smoke, sometimes wearing Miranda's face, sometimes wearing nothing but shadow and hunger. She knew Coraline's patterns, her preferences. Twice now, she'd arrived at hiding spots moments after Coraline had abandoned them. She's hurting me, Coraline realized, cutting off options. Through a crack in the floor, she saw her parents. They'd barricaded themselves in their bedroom, pushing furniture against the door. Her mother had found a hammer somewhere. Her father was on the phone. No signal, of course, but he kept trying, kept dialing, as if persistence could break through whatever the beldam had done to the house. They were safe. For now. Coraline kept crawling, the garden shears clutched in one sweating hand. The space narrowed, forcing her to squeeze through gaps that scraped skin off her shoulders. Behind her, something began to follow. Not footsteps. The button-eyed people couldn't fit here. This was something else. A rustling, like fabric being pulled through the walls. She remembered the dress made of doll faces and crawled faster. The crawl space opened into a forgotten room. Not forgotten, hidden. The walls were covered in children's drawings, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. All showing the same thing, a tall figure with button eyes standing over smaller figures. The children in the drawings had no faces, just smooth blanks where features should be. In the corner, a small door. Not the door. She'd checked. It was still sealed. This was different. Older. The wood was black with age, and carved into it were words in a language that predated the house, predated the town, maybe predated human speech altogether. But Coraline could read them anyway, the meaning pressing into her brain like a migraine. Mother's room, do not enter. This means you, Coraline. A laugh bubbled up, hysteria dressed as humor. Even here, even now, she was being scolded like a child. But what choice did she have? The rustling was getting closer, and through the walls she could hear YB's voice, sing-song and wrong. Come out, wherever you are. We have such games to play, such wonderful games." She opened the door. The room beyond defied geography. It was too big to fit in the house, too old to exist in Oregon, too real to be possible. The walls were lined with dolls, not Miranda's modern creations, but ancient things. Some were clay, some were wood, some were made from materials she didn't want to identify. All had button eyes. In the center of the room sat a loom. Not a modern loom, but something that belonged in a museum or a nightmare. The threads running through it weren't thread at all, but something that looked like hair. Human hair. Children's hair, in every color, every texture. And working at it, humming tunelessly, was a woman. Not the beldam. Not Miranda. This was something else, something that wore the shape of an old woman the way others wore clothes. Her fingers, she had too many, worked the loom with practiced ease, weaving something that made Coraline's eyes water to look at. "You're early," the woman said without looking up. "The game's not over yet. Who are you?" "I'm the grandmother, of course. Every story needs one." She pulled a thread tight, and somewhere in the house someone screamed. "Sit, watch, learn. You're going to be here for a very long time. I'm going to win." The grandmother laughed, a sound like dried leaves burning. "Oh, child, you already have. And you've already lost. That's the beauty of it." She gestured to the tapestry she was weaving. "Look closer." Against every instinct, Coraline looked. The tapestry showed the pink palace, but not as a building, as a web, and caught in it hundreds of threads, each one a life, a soul, a story. She saw herself at 11, crawling through the tunnel. She saw herself now, hiding in this room. She saw herself at 30, 40, 50, still in the house, still playing the game, still thinking she could win. "Time," the grandmother said, "isn't a line, it's a web, and we're the spiders." No, Coraline backed toward the door, but it was gone. Of course it was gone. "The beldam you knew? My daughter. Miranda, my granddaughter. And you." The grandmother finally looked up, and her eyes weren't buttons. They were holes, absences, places where reality had worn through. "You're the next in line, the one who survived, the one who came back, the one who can't let go." "You're lying." "Am I?" The grandmother gestured to the shears in Coraline's hand. "Those have been in your family for generations. Your mother used them. Your grandmother. Every woman in your line. Back and back and back. Did you think it was coincidence that you ended up here? That the doll found you?" The shears felt suddenly heavy. Coraline looked at them, really looked, and saw the truth. The handles were carved with tiny faces, children's faces. Some of them looked familiar. One looked like her. "Every generation," the grandmother continued, weaving, always weaving, "one is chosen, one survives, one thinks they've won, and eventually one takes their place in the web, catching the next generation, playing the next game. I won't." "You already have. Why do you think you stayed in the house? Why do you think you checked the door every day? You're not guarding against her, child. You're guarding the threshold, making sure no one else can win what you won." Through the walls, Coraline could hear the seekers getting closer. But worse, she could hear something else. Her own voice from 3 years ago, saying, "I wish I had a better mother." Her voice from earlier tonight, saying, "I'll play your game." Her voice from futures that hadn't happened yet, saying things she didn't want to hear. 2 hours until dawn, the grandmother noted. Better run along, wouldn't want to forfeit. The door was back. It had always been back. Coraline stumbled through it, mind reeling, the grandmother's laughter following her like smoke. In the hallway, the beldam waited. "There you are," she said with Miranda's mouth. "I was starting to worry you'd found somewhere too clever." Coraline raised the shears, and the beldam smiled. "Yes," she said. "Yes, that's right. Fight, run, hide, play the game. It's what we do, isn't it? What we've always done. What we'll always do." Behind the beldam, the button-eyed hunters gathered, but Coraline was looking past them, to the tapestry she could still see in her mind. The web, the pattern, the game that had been playing since before she was born. "Unless," she said quietly, "I change the rules." The beldam's smile faltered. "What? You said it yourself. Doors are just ideas. So are games. So are rules." Coraline lowered the shears. "So is winning. You can't just, I forfeit." The words hung in the air like a confession, like a broken promise, like a key turning in a lock that had been waiting to open. Everything stopped. Chapter 7: The Unmaking. The word forfeit broke something fundamental in the Pink Palace's reality. Cracks appeared in the air itself, spreading like frozen lightning. Through them, Coraline could see other versions of this moment. Herself at 11, saying no to the buttons. Herself at 40, finally giving in. Herself as something ancient and hungry, welcoming a new child to the house. All of them real. All of them happening now. The beldam's face cycled through confusion, rage, and something that might have been fear. You can't forfeit. That's not how the game works. Exactly, Coraline said, and the cracks widened. The button-eyed hunters stood frozen, their programming unable to process a game with no players. Wybe's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. His grandmother reached for knitting that wasn't there. The actresses began to melt back into their elderly forms, youth sliding off like paint in rain. What have you done? The beldam shed Miranda's skin entirely, revealing the spider thing underneath. But even she was glitching, her needle fingers stuttering between solid and smoke. I broke the pattern, Coraline said. She felt strange, light, like she was dissolving at the edges. No winner, no loser, no next generation. Just nothing. The house groaned, a sound that came from its foundations and went deeper into whatever dark soil had birthed this cycle. Doors began opening everywhere, not just the small ones, but every door, every window, every crack in the walls. Each one showed a different Pink Palace, a different trap, a different child learning the rules of an ancient game. Through the chaos, Coraline saw her parents' door burst open. Her mother stumbled out, hammer raised, her father behind her wild-eyed and humming Beethoven's Ninth like a battle hymn. "Coraline!" her mother screamed. But Coraline was looking at the shears in her hand. The faces carved into the handles were moving now, tiny mouths opening in silent screams or songs or secrets. Her grandmother's face was there, her great-grandmother's. Back and back and back, a line of women who'd thought they'd won. She understood now. The game wasn't about buttons or souls or even survival. It was about continuation, about making sure there was always a beldam, always a palace, always a trap waiting for the next lonely child. Every winner became a guardian. Every guardian became a monster. Every monster birthed the next cycle. "Unless," she whispered and raised the shears. "No." The beldam lunged, but she was coming apart, her form unable to hold without the game's structure. "You don't know what you're doing. Without us, without the game, there's nothing to hold it back." "Hold what back?" The beldam's button eyes reflected infinite terror. "What do you think we were guarding against?" But Coraline was already cutting. Not at the beldam, not at the threads or the walls or the closing doors. She was cutting at herself, at the parts of her that had been woven into this story before she was born. The shears moved like they knew the work, finding seams she hadn't known existed. Her scar split open, not bleeding but unraveling. The thread that had bound her to this place for 3 years came loose, and with it came memories that weren't quite hers. Her grandmother, finding a door. Her great-grandmother, sewing dolls. Back and back and back, each woman thinking she was protecting the next generation by maintaining the prison. "Coraline, stop!" Her mother was fighting through the dissolving hunters, but the house was folding in on itself, geometry giving up. "I love you," Coraline called back, still cutting. Her edges were going soft, blurring into the cracks that spread through everything. "Tell Dad his cheese actually did change my life." She found the final thread, the one that connected her to the shears, to the house, to the whole damned story. It was silver bright and humming with potential, all the futures she could have had, all the pasts that had led here. She cut it. The beldam screamed, a sound like every abandoned child who'd ever wished for a different mother. The grandmother appeared, no longer weaving but unraveling, her tapestry coming apart into individual threads that whipped through the air like living things. "Stupid girl," the grandmother shrieked. "You don't know what you've done." The other mother was never the real monster. She was the cork in the bottle. She was what kept the nothing from eating everything. Too late, Coraline understood. The game, horrible as it was, had been a structure, a story, something to keep the vast, hungry emptiness at bay. And she'd just broken it. The nothing poured through the cracks like inverse light. Not darkness. Darkness was something. This was the absence of anything, the space between stories, the hunger that existed before the first word was spoken. It ate the button-eyed people first, unmaking them so thoroughly it was as if they'd never been. Then the walls, then the air itself. "Run!" Coraline screamed at her parents, but her voice was already fading. She could feel herself coming apart, all the carefully sewn pieces of identity and memory separating at the seams. Her mother reached her just as the last thread snapped. For a moment, they were eye to eye, Mel's real, brown, human eyes, full of tears and terror and love, so much love it hurt to see. "My brave girl," her mother whispered. Then Coraline was nothing. Then she was everything. Then she was Pop, standing in an empty field where the Pink Palace had been. The rain had stopped. The sun was rising, painting the sky in colors that had no names because they'd never been seen before. Her parents stood beside her, solid and real and human. No button eyes, no threads, no seams. Around them, the other residents, the real ones, the ones who'd been sleeping under button-eyed copies. Ms. Lovat, ancient but alive. The actresses, bickering about whose fault it was they'd lost 3 days. Even Mr. Babinski, completely blue but completely human, complaining about his missing mice. "What happened?" Wybie asked, and he was just Wybie, awkward and gangly and human and free. Coraline looked at her hands. The shears were gone. The scar was gone. But she remembered. She remembered everything. The game, the pattern, the horrible necessity of it all, and her choice to end it. "I think," she said slowly, "I unmade something that needed unmaking." But in the distance, where the Pink Palace had stood, something flickered, just for a moment. A shadow without a source, a whisper without a voice, a hunger without a mouth. The nothing was still there, not trapped anymore, not contained by games and rules and patterns, just waiting, watching, learning. Coraline felt her mother's hand slip into hers, warm and real and alive. "Come on," Mel said. "Let's go home." "Mom," Coraline said, not moving, "we don't have a home. The Pink Palace is gone." Her father laughed, actually laughed. "Insurance, kiddo. Beautiful, beautiful insurance. We'll find somewhere new, somewhere boring, somewhere with absolutely no mysterious doors or mysterious neighbors or mysterious anything." "Sounds perfect," Coraline lied, because she could feel it still. The nothing. It wasn't gone. She'd destroyed its cage, not the beast itself, and now it was free to find new shapes, new games, new stories to inhabit. She'd won by refusing to play. But some games don't end just because you walk away from the board. Chapter 8, The New Game. 6 months later, in a suburb of Portland that prided itself on being normal, Coraline Jones noticed the first sign. It was small, a child's drawing stuck to a stop sign with scotch tape. Crayon on construction paper, the kind of thing kids did sometimes. Except this drawing showed a door, a small, impossible door. And through it, something that might have been a tunnel, or might have been a throat. She peeled it off, folded it carefully, added it to her collection. "Find another one?" Wybie asked. He visited every weekend now, taking the Macs down from Ashland where his grandmother had moved them. He said it was to hang out. They both knew it was to check, to make sure she was still herself, still human, still unbuttoned. "Third one this week," she said, showing him the drawing. "Different kid each time. I've been tracking them." Her new room was smaller than the one at the Pink Palace, but she'd made it hers. Maps covered one wall, Portland and the surrounding area marked with red pins. Each pin was a sighting, a drawing, a report of children playing games that sounded too familiar, a parent mentioning their kid's new imaginary friend who promised them everything they wanted. "Maybe it's nothing," Wybie said without conviction. "Kids draw weird stuff." "Look closer." He did, and his face paled. In the corner of the drawing, so small you'd miss it if you weren't looking, was a figure. Tall, thin, with holes where eyes should be. The nothing, given crayon form by a 6-year-old who didn't know what they were seeing. "It's learning," Coraline said. "When I destroyed the game, I gave it freedom. But I also gave it curiosity. It doesn't know how to be a story yet, but it's trying." Her parents were at work, normal jobs now. Her mom at a plant nursery, her dad teaching cooking classes at the community center. They'd adapted to their new life with the resilience of people who'd survived something impossible. But sometimes Coraline caught them looking at shadows too long or checking locks that were already locked. They knew. Even if they didn't talk about it, they knew something had followed them from the Pink Palace. "So what do we do?" YB asked. Coraline pulled out a notebook, pages filled with observations, theories, plans. The Beldam had rules, structure, tradition. She was horrible, but she was limited. The nothing doesn't have those limitations. It's like a virus that's learning how to be a disease. That's terrifying. Yeah. She traced the latest cluster of sightings, but it's also opportunity. It's learning from us, from what we fear, what we want. Every drawing, every nightmare, every story these kids tell, they're teaching it how to be our monster. How is that an opportunity? Coraline smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who'd cut herself free from fate and lived to tell about it. Because if we're teaching it, we can teach it wrong. She showed him the other notebook. This one was filled with stories, not scary ones, but boring ones. Tales of monsters who got tired, of doors that led to dentist offices, of games where everyone won participation trophies and went home for sensible dinners. You're trying to bore it to death? I'm trying to teach it that being a monster is exhausting. Look, she pulled up a forum on her laptop. I've been posting these stories online. Kids are sharing them. They're drawing pictures of tired monsters who just want naps, of other mothers who are too busy with their own hobbies to bother kidnapping anyone. That's, YB paused, processing, actually kind of genius. The nothing wants to be a story because stories have power, but stories can be changed, retold, made mundane. She pulled out another map, this one global. It's not just here. Kids everywhere are drawing doors, but look at the dates. The pattern was clear. The drawings were becoming less frightening over time. The doors led to increasingly mundane places. The figures behind them looked less hungry and more confused. It's working, YB breathed. Maybe. Or maybe it's just adapting, learning to hide better. Coraline closed the notebook. But it's something. A new game, but one where we make the rules. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mom. Dinner in 20. Your dad made his famous mushroom risotto. Normal, mundane, safe. I should go, YB said. Graham's making me help with her moving sale. She's finally getting rid of all the stuff from the old house. All of it? Well? He looked embarrassed. She kept one thing, said it was important, said you'd understand. He pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. When Coraline unwrapped it, her breath caught. It was a button. Black, shiny, perfectly ordinary, except for the way it seemed to watch her. She said to tell you, YB continued, every lock needs a key. Every story needs an ending. Every game needs a final move. Coraline held the button up to the light. Through its holes, she could see infinite possibilities, infinite endings, infinite choices. Tell her thank you, she said. Tell her I understand. After YB left, Coraline sat at her desk, button in one hand, pen in the other. Outside, suburban Portland went about its normal business. Kids played, parents worked, life continued. But in the margins, in the spaces between normal, something watched, something learned, something evolved. She began to write. Once upon a time, there was a nothing that wanted to be something. It tried being scary, but that was exhausting. It tried being magical, but that was complicated. Finally, it tried being normal, and found that was the hardest thing of all. The button gleamed in the lamplight. Somewhere, a child drew a picture of a door that led to a library. Another imagined a monster that was allergic to children. A third told their parents about an other mother who was too busy with her book club to notice them. The game continued, but now everyone was playing. And in the distance, where the pink palace had once stood, grass grew over empty ground. Sometimes, on very quiet nights, you could hear something there. Not screaming, not crying, not the tap-tap-tap of needle fingers, just the sound of nothing, learning how to be something else, learning how to be ordinary. Which, as any child could tell you, was the most magical thing of all. End. But stories never really end, they just stop being told. And somewhere in a house that's perfectly normal, behind a door that's perfectly small, something perfectly ordinary waits. It's learned patience, it's learned subtlety, it's learned to hide in plain sight. Most importantly, it's learned that the best trap isn't the one that promises everything you want, it's the one that promises everything is fine.